Good morning. Good morning. Well, just about morning. We're almost hitting lunchtime by now. My name is Georgie Nightingall. I'm here to give you more an experience, I'd say, than a talk on how to have deep conversations or a deep connection with other people. I'm from London. I run a human connection organization called Trigger Conversations. I'm also doing a PhD part-time at Imperial College on human connection design. So how can we actually make sure that human connection happens intentionally rather than rely upon it organically, which often means it doesn't happen? And most importantly, I am a conversation addict. I love good conversation. So let me tell you a little bit about how I got here before we jump into our experience. So what do you do? This is the question a number of years ago, 2016, that I learned to hate. It felt like the beginning of every single conversation. What do you do? And I felt myself repeating on like an elevator pitch. I'm a project manager. To be met with, interesting. I felt stereotyped. I was bored with my responses. I was bored with where the conversation ended up going, the same places again and again. And I was craving the deep, meaningful conversations that would actually allow me to learn and see the world in a different place. Because that's my belief, that great conversations aren't just about exchanging cards with somebody, but in fact, an opportunity to change the way you see the world, to change the relationship with yourself, to see other people different, to understand their perspectives, their story, to reshape our diversity of thought, our narratives about how the world works, what is possible. They're meant to feel exciting. They're meant to be without agenda. It's a space where you can explore the given moment, see what shows up, and feel truly connected to somebody. Now, this is pretty important because basically everything in life starts with conversation. All relationships, personal, professional, start with interactions. In fact, you could say that life is conversation. Life is a series of interactions, one after the other. But we aren't making those experiences meaningful. In fact, we're just relying upon them to be okay, and a lot of the time we come away disappointed. So actually, if we can start to be more intentional about these experiences and actually design them better, we can have a lot more meaningful conversations, which leads to a lot better relationships. So today, rather than just tell you about great conversation, I thought we'd actually have some. And you have a chance to experience what deep connection feels like. So I'm going to give you a deep conversation experience, and then we're going to deconstruct it afterwards. And I'm going to explain some of the principles at play that I've been using in the design that you can then take into your own experiences. How this is going to work? We're going to have a conversation menu. So it's a bit of a metaphor. I'm afraid there's no food here. You'll have to wait. I know this kind of stuff does trigger hunger, I find. But like a dinner course, we're going to have different courses of conversation. And each course is going to be a different theme, a different depth. So we're going to start with a canapé, light, icebreakers, just 5 minutes, one conversation with a partner. We'll then move to our starter, which is going to be a slightly deeper. We'll talk more about passions, again in pairs. Then comes the main course. Well, there's meat, deep and thoughtful conversation. There's vegetarian, nourishing conversation. And there is fish, controversial conversation. So you can choose whichever one feels like it might tickle your fancy. And after the main course, there is, of course, dessert, sweet and delightful conversation. And no meal is complete without coffee, reflective, revitalizing, and warming, which we'll have again in pairs. So it's going to be quite an experience. And then we'll come back to here, talk about our experience. I'll deconstruct some of the principles and have some time for the Q&A at the end. How do you feel about that? Yes, seeing some nods. Wonderful. So how this is going to work? Look around. There are plenty of people here. You're going to find a new person, or 3 when it comes to the main course, to have a conversation with. And the aim of this is to speak to somebody you don't already know. And as soon as you found your partner, you can look at the question, which I'm going to put on the screen, and dive straight in. The invitation here is for you to banish small talk, none of that hello, where are you from? What do you do? What company do you represent? Blah, blah, blah. And just instead to dive in, be your real self, jump through, don't feel the need to follow scripts, essentially. And then when the time is up, I'll get back on the microphone and we will switch again, and you have another opportunity to speak to somebody new. Now, the challenge with this every time is that you're going to want to have a longer conversation and you're not going to want to end it. So I'm going to ask you to please be slightly considerate, and you can have a chance to maybe continue the conversation later with the person you've just met, and we'll switch around. So, ready? We're going to start with the canapé. The first question is, what makes a person a good traveling companion? So, I invite you to stand up, find somebody you haven't met today, and dive in. What makes a person a good traveling companion? So find a partner. Wonderful. That marks the end of your canapé. I hope that was a sweet icebreaker and you're now feeling somewhat warmed up. So I'm going to invite you to actually get on your feet and go and find somebody who's sitting in a different section to you, and you're going to jump into your starter, which is slightly longer. So find somebody in the section next to you you haven't yet met and jump into your starter. What are you currently addicted to or obsessed with? Yes. Thank you. I hope the conversations are becoming richer and richer as we have more time and you're jumping in. And I'm sorry to break you off, but we've got to have the main course. So, quick reminder on the main course. This one is slightly different because you have 3 options. You can either have meat, which is deep and thoughtful, which is over here. You can have vegetarian, which is nourishing conversation over here, or fish, controversial conversation over here. So what I want to invite you to do right now is just check in with yourself. What kind of conversation am I up for right now for the next 10 minutes? Do I want to go deep? Do I want to have nourishing? Do I want to get a bit of controversial? Once you make the decision, you're then going to wander over to this part of the room, find 2 other people, so it's a group of 3, who also want to have the same kind of conversation as you, and then move away so you've got some space, essentially. You can just dive straight in. So the first step is, which one do you actually want? Check in now, make that decision. It's really hard, otherwise you'll find yourself kind of doing this. Go to the place, find 2 other people, a group of 3, and then dive in. Yes? Yes, so meat, deep and thoughtful, vegetarian, nourishing, fish, controversial. So I'm going to put it on the screen as well. So find a place that you want to go to. So find 2 other people, you want a group of 3, and then go away and find a section where you can have your conversation. Vegetarian is over here. We've got meat, deep and thoughtful. Great. Which one? Yes, nourishing conversation. So find 2 other people. So once you've got your group of 3, find a space and jump in. Yes, and the question's up. Choose a question. So if you can maybe find a 3 and a 3, that would be great. So hardest part here, just find a partner, find the partners, 2 people, and dive straight in.
If I share my biggest failure, how can they be controversial about it?
You'll find out.
Okay.
We're coming to the close of the main course. I wonder if these conversations especially have made you think, pause, reflect, connect. Now, I'm going to invite you to take a slight turn, and we're going to explore a new course, which is dessert. Of course, you're going to have dessert every meal. Sweet and delightful conversation. So I'd like to first of all thank your partners for the conversation you've just had, and to find a new person sitting in a different area of the room. So you want to shift into a different space. And we're going to have a bit in pairs again, in pairs for our dessert course. So find a new partner. No, I'll ignore them, yeah. I hope your dessert is sweet and delightful. And I'm going to invite us to stay with the same partner to close off our menu. Coffee, reflective, revitalizing, and warming. So ask your partner, what have you become conscious of during this experience? And what can you take away? What have you become conscious of during this experience? And we're just going to have 2 minutes for this one, so have some time for Q&A at the end. Yep, stay with your partner on this one. Can we use the mic? Thank you. I hope the coffee was reflective and revitalizing. So this marks the end of a conversation menu. Before I share a little bit about what we've just done and start dissecting some of the principles at play, I'd like to invite you to just share a couple of words about what that experience feels like in the body level right now for you to have. So we have the roving mic. If people would like to just share in a couple of words how they feel.
Yes, well, thank you for doing the experiment, and I feel very connected.
Connected, beautiful, thank you. Have a few more.
Hello. I was actually talking to Sarah, and we were saying precisely this. Like, we already feel like friends. Like, I can already imagine her playing an instrument or, like, breakdancing, you know. Yeah, those are the things that she wanted to do. So it gets a lot more intimate quite quickly. And, you know, just thinking about the standard questions that you ask throughout the venue to, like, oh, what do you do? Where are you from? I don't know. It doesn't really connect as much as these wild abilities that Sarah wants to have, for example.
Amazing.
You know?
I want to see some break dancing as well.
Yeah, same here.
Thank you. Intimacy, I'm hearing. And maybe a female voice would be lovely as well.
Yeah, thank you again. I think it's just made clear that some conversations would definitely be influenced positively if we just put it on a more personal level than just focusing on the business stuff, because you just talk completely different to one another.
Yeah.
And that's definitely supporting this connective thing. And I think that we should include this more into our business stuff on a daily basis to get a better connection on the personal level to one another.
Yeah, wonderful. Personal. Human, maybe, is a good word that describes that. So let me share what's been happening in this experience. So you've just had a human connection experience. And the hilarious thing is, this is pretty normal. This is our natural state. And what's happening in the world right now, and what's always been happening, is that we have barriers in place. Those barriers can be technological, having phones and technology everywhere. They can be societal, contextual, We have drifted apart. There's a level of polarization. So when it comes to designing experiences, all we actually need to do is remove the barriers and help people connect at a human level. So my friend and collaborator, Peter Mandino, who's in my research group, identified 19 barriers, psychological, social, and contextual, that actually get in the way from people connecting. And I'd like to talk about 7 of them today that have been highlighted through this experience. So we'll start on the left-hand side with apprehension. We want to connect at a human level. There's always risk involved. Risk in the unfamiliar people and the unfamiliar context. And if that risk is bigger than benefits, then people often won't engage. They won't step back. So a key part of designing experiences like this is actually to remove the level of uncertainty by creating structure, helping people navigate the route so they know where to go. So today, I gave you a full conversation menu. I said, this is what we're going to do, and we did it. It makes it easier than rather than have to just know and think, oh my God, should I ask this? What am I meant to be doing? Give people structure. It helps them move forward. Appropriateness. How do you want to show up? What are the social norms in place? Social norms are completely contextual. They change in every environment. So when we appear in a space, we're always looking out and working out, what's the right thing for me to do right now? What's appropriate? So it's really important in new spaces to be explicit, to model the kind of social norm that you expect, and then also to tell people that's what we're going to do. And I said that again, I want you to be your whole self. I want you to get off script, banish the small talk, and go for it. This is the social norm that I'm being clear about, inviting you to be authentic. Architecture. So how can we design a space that actually allows people to move around and actually engage and connect? Is there space? Can people get up from the chairs? I invite you to stand up, to move. If we're sitting down, we're naturally fixed point. How can we actually make people move around and so they connect and bump into each other and so there's proximity, which increases the chances of connection? Aids. Aids give us permission. Permission to jump into the good stuff that we kind of want to do, but we kind of feel like we can't. So permission, in this sense, the aid was the questions, the conversation starters. They're the things that say, we're going to dive straight in. And they can be as simple as conversation starters. They could be as simple, actually, as just putting 2 chairs looking next to each other to invite people to actually start a conversation. Authenticity. Everyone in this room wants to be themselves. But sometimes it doesn't feel like we can be. And authenticity is super important because it is that which breeds trust and connection. So again, creating structures, creating social norms, and invite people to feel safe to be authentic is really important when you're allowing people to create experience where they can actually connect. And they could be so much more than their label. At no point did I ask you to explain where you're from, what you do, but instead start talking about how you see the world. Your feelings, your experiences, your stories. Affinity. Unfortunately, we don't all believe we like each other. We make a lot of judgments very quickly about who we're going to connect with based on what they look like, their race sometimes, how they dress themselves, their political views. So it's really important in designing experiences to actually create a structure that allows people to realize how like they are to somebody, how they share things in common. How actually, oh wow, this person is just as complex, strange, weird, fascinating as I am. Getting people to that point to let them overcome the biases that are in place. Also with choice, I said go and find somebody new. We tend to always gravitate towards people we know. So you have to create structures that actually force people to go and connect with people outside of their circle. And finally, applicability. We only really want to connect with people who we think are going to be applicable to us, that are going to provide some level of value. Now, it helps that you all work in the same kind of industry, so there's some level of that already here. But also, we're trying to invite people to see how applicable you are through questions, helping people realize, oh yeah, actually, wow, we have a lot more in common. We're a lot more alike than we thought we were. It might not be obvious. So that's 7 barriers. There's 19 that are all important when you're thinking about designing experiences. How can you help people be connected? How can you help people have a memorable experience and actually be their true human self? Now, I'd like to, in a couple minutes left, to invite anyone who has questions to share them. I think we have a mic. Oh, yeah.
All right. How can we create these types of interactions outside of here? Because one thing is being over here with you leading the whole
Yep.
dynamic, but another thing is going outside and approaching a stand that hasn't seen this content and engaging with, hey, what would be an ability that you would like to wake up tomorrow with?
Yeah, it's a great question. I used to, when I first started my company, I used to run these experiences for deep, meaningful conversations with strangers. And the question I got the most was, how do we do this in the real world? We can't just go up to with question cards. And actually, that led me to design a whole curriculum involved in that, which involves using statements sometimes rather than questions, inviting people to see our inside world, say things like what you're noticing about yourself, noticing about other people, giving compliments, sharing about the context. But one thing I'd like to invite you to do is to actually ponder these questions. From the last slide, there we are, is use these as your starting point. How can I remove the perceived risk and fears people might have in this interaction? How can I show up to feel less risky? What can I do? Or how can I appear? I can be friendly. I can be open-hearted. I can share my agenda with somebody. Hey, you just look like you were interesting. You look like you know where the loos are. I love your coat. Find ways to actually start breaking down the barriers, essentially. So this starts with ourselves, but it's also our responsibility when we're designing spaces in groups and meetings to start thinking about these questions as well. Happy to share more specific tips after the talk. Any other questions?
I love the way that you've taken small talk to big talk. And I would love your interpretation of how you know when to listen versus when to talk. Because I know that always kind of, the balance of that isn't always struck perfectly.
Yeah.
So how do you gauge that?
This is such a good question because we're all taught, be a great listener, ask loads of questions. And I absolutely love questions, as you can tell from the questions we explored today. But there is a point in the conversation where you actually need to build momentum. Building momentum at the beginning often means self-disclosure. It means putting something out there, an offer, if anyone's here familiar with improv theatre, an offer that helps someone else then build on what you've shared. So actually, I think there's a lot of value in making statements sometimes to build a conversation to start, and then steering with questions. Questions narrow. They say we're going in this direction. Statements are open. They invite people into a space of wandering with you. So in fact, at the beginning, I often suggest use statements with people. Talk about your own experiences, your own feelings. Notice things about them. Notice things about the context you're sharing in this event. Whether you're noticing, oh wow, lots of people here, really busy, or gosh, that stand over there was had such an interesting person on it. Whatever it is, invites people to notice as well and go, oh yeah, I saw that too, and then add and build. That starts the conversation slowly, and then the questions allow you to go deeper. Sometimes people aren't ready to go deep fast. And actually what's important is you build the trust first to get the conversation roll going. So self-disclose more than you think. If you're vulnerable first, it allows other people to be vulnerable too, because you're modeling it. When someone asks you, how are you? If you respond with fine, you're then showing them that what you expect back is fine. You're saying it's not okay to be authentic. If you actually respond immediately and short how you feel, people then realize, oh yeah, okay, cool. I'm going to give a personal response as well. Thank you. Any last questions? Another one.
Sorry. Just one more question. How do you know when the conversation isn't going anywhere and you leave? Because you said at the very beginning of all of this, I had all these conversations with these people and I was like, oh my God, I'm so bored and this, that, and the other. Like, that's not going to stop. So at what point do you go, this is not going anywhere, I'm going to go and find someone who's interesting?
Yeah, it's a great question. Generally, people's fear about diving into conversations is not being able to get out of it. So it's really important to recognize that everything has an ending. And actually, that's just a virtue of life. It's okay to leave. And actually, you can leave very gracefully. Hey, thanks very much for the conversation. I found this particularly helpful around this. Let's connect if you want to connect and walk away. Now, the question you ask, though, is when do you reach that point? Well, the first question I ask myself is, how am I contributing to the boringness of this conversation? Am I also just sitting and asking boring, dull questions and contributing boring, dull information? It always starts with ourselves. That's the first thing I learned on my journey is if I'm bored, then the chances are they're probably bored too. And actually, I could probably offer in a more interesting question, or I could offer something that's more interesting in the conversation. And I might do that a few times, and I might actually then ask myself, okay, I'm still not enjoying this. That's interesting. Do I want to stay in this conversation? And sometimes I might decide, yeah, I can stay for another 5 minutes. Or I might say, no, actually, what? I'm done. And I had a good time, and time to move on. And it's okay to leave. You're an event where you're here to meet people. Time is valuable. Everyone here knows that. And so there's no hard feelings. Hey, great to meet you. I'm sure you probably want to go meet other people here as well. Let's connect, chat later, see you at the other events, for instance, and move on. The challenge, of course, is always recognizing that often we're really truly biased, and actually we've started labeling somebody because they said this thing, and you thought, oh, they must be a really boring person because they said this thing. And actually the chances are that's just a tiny corner of their world. And if we're really curious, we can actually explore and find so much more than we thought. Maybe we can start changing our questions. Good question as well, thank you. Any more questions? I think we might be out of time as it is anyway. So if anyone does have any more questions, I'll be here on the side, very happy to take them. Also, please do connect with me online. Happy to get engaged in a conversation, send me something curious on LinkedIn or my email. Well, I love conversations, so let's keep it going. Thank you very much.